Alex Len is headed to the Pacers. What can the big men bring? Should he be signed by the team? Plus, these slow starts. What's going on? Is the lineup change the answer? And we'll talk a little bit about teams the Pacers care about more with the trade deadline in the rearview mirror on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Monday. You made it to a new week, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today, a lot to get into in Pacerland. They have a new big man coming, should everything go well in the waiver process. They have slow starts hitting them hard. What is going on there? Are lineups to blame or injuries to blame? Plus, I want to look at something I like to do. Trades are done. Teams' directions are very clear. What are the Pacers' rooting interests now, particularly in the draft? Can anything go their way that could help them in that department? They'll have to sort through all that as the season goes on. It might be a little too early, but it's never really too early to dive into that stuff. We'll start with Alex Len, who, again, pending the waiver process, going the way the Pacers hope, will become a Pacer. He could be claimed by any team. He was waived Saturday night late, so I don't know, Monday, Tuesday range, he could join the Pacers, and we'll see if it's a 10-day deal or a rest of season deal. None of that's clear on my end yet. Regardless, it's very clear why they would want him, right? Chad Buchanan said it on the radio, I believe, with JMV last Friday, that they could use center depth, right? They've been fortunate that since the two Achilles tears for their backup bigs, they've been mostly healthy at the five, but Myles hurt right now. Thomas Bryant hasn't missed a game yet, but has historically. They've been very fortunate that that's been the case since then, but it's risky. And so a center is important. Alex Len has two Achilles. Great. He would make a good fit for the Pacers just on that alone, just someone who can provide depth. But what's he actually good at, right? What is the appeal of him? Why is he in the NBA? Why have the Kings re-signed him like 100 times? They've re-signed him, I think, 3 times. He's been on that team for 4 years. What is Alex Len? What is his appeal to them? Because he didn't play a ton. They went small with Trey Lyles a lot for their second unit. Well, the high-level stuff says his best skill and his best offensive weapon in terms of his most efficient plays compared to the rest of the league is actually his putbacks, right? He's very good when he gets a board on the offensive end, going right back up and putting it in. Offensive rebounds per 36 for him, 3.5 this year and higher than that in most recent seasons, right? That's a pretty healthy number. He's obviously a 7-footer. He should be good given his size and height on the glass. This year, it's, he has a small sample of actual play this season, but putbacks are his best play type by far. It's his only thing that's actually considered above average in the NBA all season is those putbacks. Everything else has been either too small of a sample for synergy to give it an actual log of good, poor, whatever. Except for one other thing, I think cutting is below average. He's done that enough to actually get a label on it. But the putbacks are there. And his offensive rebound per 36 numbers, only Thomas Bryant has a higher number on the Pacers. And we see that Thomas Bryant is probably the Pacers' best rebounder, right? So in that way, I think that is where he will stand out as a person or helper the most, is on that type of play, or when he's on around the rim, even if he's not necessarily there shooting himself, he can be a weapon actually getting the ball, giving the Pacers some extra possessions when he is out there. But if you go back through past seasons where there's enough of a sample to actually see stuff, it's not just this year that the sample is so small that that's where he stands out. It's that years and years and years of data say putbacks are his best play type, right? Last year, putbacks was, guess what? His best play type. That's when he was the most efficient compared to the rest of the league. Everything else was either below average or kind of average, right? His pick and roll game, somewhere that he was actually used a little bit in Sacramento last year, just got a little bit below average. And I think that is just mostly because of his finishing, right? To dive into Basketball Reference, and people I've talked to about him said, his finishing's a little, below where you'd want it to be for a big man. Right around the basket, Alex Len is a decent finisher, right? 72% this year from 0 to 3 feet, 80% last year, 74% the year before. For his career, that number's really weak. He started his career very bad at finishing. He's certainly gotten better at it. That's like Myles Turner levels of, right at the basket. Like most centers are pretty good in that range. But when he gets into the, let's say, floater range or just a little farther from the basket, very poor touch. 38.7% for his career. This year, he looks good, 58.3%, but it's obviously a small sample, right? He's only played 250 minutes this season, and that is by far a career high. He's never been over 44%. He had one season higher than that, but he's very rarely been above the 40s or 30s in percentages there. So a key for him, I think, and the key for the Pacers will be trying to get him shots as close to the rim as possible. That's easier said than done because guess what? Every player wants that kind of shot, right? I made that case for TJ McConnell and his struggles, although it seems like there's even more to that than I hinted at. But he's with Len, for him on these roles, it's going to be very important, I think, for the Pacers to try to get him going as close to the basket with as much power and space as possible. And this season, his average shot distance is 7.5 feet. That's the highest since 2020-21 when he wasn't with the Kings, right? So clearly Sacramento made it and tried to do this already, get his role to a place where his shots are as close as possible. Now, if you match up his true shooting percentages by season with his average shot distance, the last year he was with the Suns, he was at 61.2% true shooting, the second best of his career. That was the shortest average shot distance he's ever had. Similar with the Kings 2 years ago when he got his only other season over 62% true shooting. That was his best rim finishing season, right? So it's going to be it's very clear to me digging through a lot of the pick and roll data and the data itself that a key to Alex Len's success on offense, besides being a good rebounder, which is, again, important, possessions matter, will be getting him as close to the rim as possible for shot attempts, whether that is, getting the pass at the right time, whether that's avoiding post ups, whether that's on Alex Len to make the right decisions on when to shoot and when not to. That, I think, is going to be important to the Pacers. If you keep diving through years and years of this, 2022-23, so 3 seasons ago, guess what? His putback numbers were very good. He had decent cut numbers. I think that mostly if you watch the tape of what these cuts actually are, with most players, cuts are pretty clear. They come from the perimeter, they get to the basket, they're kind of open, they get the ball. With big men, especially big men on teams that have other bigs or have less shooting, it's a lot of duck-ins, right? He's in the dunker spot, he's at the elbow, whatever, and he kind of cuts across the paint or up in the paint to receive the ball in a more favorable spot or somewhere that actually makes sense for the team to give him the ball. And that's what Alex Len's touches on, what they call cuts, and I think that's fair, but no one calls it a cut. They call it a duck-in or something else. He was decent at those last year, but like other seasons, below average at just about everything else. And in 2021-22, his first season with the Kings, excellent on putbacks, his highest rated anything ever in the 4 seasons I spent really diving into the numbers. And he was everywhere else that year, but that was his best pick and roll season with the Kings as well, was 4 seasons ago. So a lot of stuff suggests that he needs to be put as close to the rim as possible. And a lot of it suggests that his best skill, which you can pretty clearly see just by looking at his basketball reference page, is his rebounding, right? 23% career defensive rebound rate. That's been hovering between, 20 and 25 with the Kings across his 4 years with Sacramento. It settled in a little over 20%. So that's great, right? Available defensive rebounds, he's getting with of those. That's awesome. But his offensive rebound rate for his career is over 10%. And with Sacramento, it was almost 11, right? That is where I think he'll supply the Pacers the most value is Thomas Bryant has these right now. I keep saying this, and it hasn't happened actually as much, I would say, in the last 5 or 10 games. But it feels like most games, Thomas Bryant has one, at least just like, F you, I'm getting this rebound, right? Moment where it's his based on just full willpower. I think that is where you'll see the most help from Alex Len in terms of what he can provide the Pacers in the minutes he's going to bring. And with Myles Turner, currently hurt or recovering from this neck thing and being day-to-day, if he can't go and they need Len to play, great. They'll have at least some sort of synergy that they'll have very rebounding-y bigs, but they'll definitely lose a lot of shooting and of touch, away from the basket. And, of course, defense. Len's defense, the rebounding makes the numbers look good, but I think the advanced numbers are telling a bit of a fib with what he can do on the defensive end of the floor. And I think his best skill, besides all the things I just said, he might immediately come to the Pacers and be the best screener that they have. He does a good job not only of making contact, being big, using his arms, let's say, quasi-legally on screens, but he's very good at being patient, right? When the big he doesn't roll too quickly. When the big's fully behind him and he can read what the defender he screened is actually doing something, he makes decisions there. And sometimes that is why he can't get all the way to the rim because he's behind the play, but that makes the screen more effective and he can read the situation better. So what is Alex Len going to be? A little more, air quotes, traditional, which makes sense for a guy drafted in 2013, which isn't that long ago. It just, in the NBA terms, there's a lot of change in the big man spot since 2013. But as a third big, this makes sense for the Pacers to me. The skills he can provide are weaknesses for the Pacers, but they've seen with these less athletic, non-shooting centers, they have to do certain things to fit on the floor. Moses Brown couldn't do them. Alex Len's going to have to rebound. He'll have to finish enough at the basket, and he'll have to defend and rebound well enough on that end of the floor to actually keep up. If he can't defend in space, it's going to be interesting to see how this goes. And I'll be curious still if this is a 10-day or if this is a rest of season deal. I haven't heard that yet. I don't know. It's not going to be official until either Monday or Tuesday. So a lot to glean from that, but that will be revealing in terms of what the Pacers could want as their backup five. But they certainly need a vet and a true five right now with Turner currently on the shelf. Speaking of Turner on the shelf, I want to dive into some Pacers lineup numbers because they haven't had Turner for all of 5 minutes in their last in 3 of their last 4 games. They've had some slow starts. Is this just not having Turner? Is something going on with the starters? Is this a small sample thing? What is happening? Why have the Pacers been starting games so poorly? And does this indicate their starting five is actually not playing very well? We'll dive into that coming up here on Locked On Pacers. Before we do that, though, we need to talk about SKIMS. When I found out SKIMS was making underwear for men, I was certainly intrigued. I've heard so much about their quality from friends and family and even other hosts on this network, so I had to give it a try. Let me tell you, it lives up to the hype. I've always had issues with underwear, fit, comfort, just finding the right style. For me, SKIMS changed all that. Their men's line offers something for everyone, from boxer briefs to classic briefs, all designed with the perfect balance of comfort and style. I tried the SKIMS boxer brief. I'm hooked. These are perfect for my active lifestyle. They move with me, never lose their shape, and stay in place. Their stretch 5-inch boxer brief, for example, is great for just running errands or being comfortable all day long. And their lightweight material feels amazing. Shop SKIMS Mens at skims.com and in SKIMS stores. Let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show from the drop-down menu that follows. And if you're looking for the perfect gift for your Valentine or for yourself, SKIMS just launched their best Valentine shop ever. Available sizes for men's, women's, and kids, even pets. Check it out at skims.com. Back here on Locked On Pacers, thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen should be Locked On Hornets or Locked On Lakers, because what? The Mark Williams trade voided. First voided trade in my time covering the NBA full-time. I believe the last one was Donis Montiunas from Houston to Detroit in 2016. It's very rare that injuries derail a trade like this without it either just happening or getting amended. It's totally nuts. Changes the season for both of those teams quite a bit. Check those out. And the Lakers beat the Pacers. So you can hear about that game on Locked On Lakers. Nuts, just completely nuts. That's going to be awkward for a lot of people. In Pacerland, they just played the Lakers, and their start was terrible, completely awful. They were down 22 points in the first quarter. And as I said on yesterday's podcast, down 22 in the first half to the Clippers. I think it got a little worse than that. I can't remember. Down 25 in the first half to the Lakers. Down 15 in the first half to Utah. They are lucky. And they were down big in the first half to Portland. I don't remember the exact number. They've been down big in the first half a lot recently. And they're lucky they got out of that road trip 2-2. You can watch that show over the weekend. But what is going on? These slow starts are dreadful. And it would be, I would understand, very easy for somebody to say, they haven't had Myles Turner. They haven't had their usual starting five. And I think that'd be lazy. Because one, even when Thomas Bryant started games, they didn't do particularly well. And two, the Myles minutes were not good, right? So let's dive into this, because I am a numbers guy. And I want to see the starting five in particular. Is this a starters thing? Because the benches actually picked them up in a lot of these first halves. So I wanted to start with the non-Myles Turner foursome that starts. So that's Tyrese Haliburton, Andrew Nembhard, Bennedict Mathurin, and Pascal Siakam. For the season, they are plus 103 in 497 minutes. That's excellent, right? With Myles Turner, they're plus 89. With Thomas Bryant, they're plus 9. They have a few minutes mixed in with like Obi Toppin and Jarris Walker. So that's good, right? For the season, those lineups have been good. What's going on here? Well, one, they're minus 37, that foursome is this month. And now a lot of that is with Myles Turner. Against Atlanta, they were minus 6. Against Portland, they were minus 16. And against the Clippers, they were minus 8. If you don't want to do the summing, that's minus 30 of that minus 37. So minus 7 with all other lineups. Now, you could take out some players, right? And you should. But what I would say next is I wanted to check something else. And that is how they did with other players. With Toppin and Nesmith in there, instead of Mathurin and Turner/Bryant, they were plus 7. And with Bryant and Nesmith with non-Mathurin, they were plus 8. So they've been playing Nesmith more with that group, and they've been playing Mathurin more with mix and match groups. And I'm not saying they should change anything or that one of those is better than the other. The very recent, very small sample of numbers says, does this necessitate some tweaks to the rotation, whether that's Mathurin coming out at a different time or Nesmith starting at all? Or is this just a small bad sample with Myles and without Myles, right? because it'd be very easy for everyone to just say, Tony, what does this matter? Tyrese Haliburton hasn't played well at all on this road trip, right? Andrew Nembhard had a dreadful game against the Lakers. Pascal Siakam, very reliable most of the season. Had one terrible game against Charlotte in their worst loss of the season. Even he had 2 bad halves, right? And I understand that. I think that that's largely true. But I wanted to keep going on this because the next thing that I dug into was that group of 4, right? Let's talk about this because I've said they should keep starting Mathurin because of how good that group has been. And Mathurin's a long-term play and a short-term play if he's fitting in well with the starting group. The last time, this blew my mind. The last time that group of 4 with Myles, that group of 4 was better than +2. Yeah, it's with Myles. I'm sorry. The last time the starting 5 that was so great for a long time was better than +2 in a game was against the Bulls on January 10th. They were +2 against the Spurs in Paris, and they've been negative or even every other game, right? They've gotten a lot of success with mix and matched units. I found that astounding, absolutely astounding. But such is life for the Pacers, right? Who just haven't played well. You can click on the game logs for that group yourself. You'll see very quickly that things have not looked particularly good for them, right? Clippers, they were a big minus. I for some reason just lost the column. -8 there, -16 against Portland. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. So what's going on here? Why can they not win these minutes? What can they do better? Well, I don't know. Is a change needed? Is the bench just playing well? Will they settle into the level they had in December and early January? Is the answer just starting Nesmith, a lineup that they know from last year can be good? Again, my reasoning for no change of starting 5 was that the old group was so good, but it hasn't been. However, it's only been, what am I talking about, 9 days, 5 games? But this stretch extends longer than that, right? And that is why this is actually worth a discussion, is that it's extended out for a long time. So let's actually dive into this, right? To read them all in general, this is the starting 5 of Turner, Siakam, Nembhard, Haliburton, Mathurin. -8 against the Clippers, -16 against Portland, -6 against Atlanta, +2 Spurs game 2, -2 Spurs game 1, -6 against Philly, -16 against Cleveland, +23 in that Bulls game. So that they're going to hit a month of play where they have 1 game over 0, and that +23 will be over a month ago. All the rest are in the negatives, right? So maybe they are stumbling as a unit. That is possible, but I'm going to tell you why actually that's probably not the case. Now, if they did make a change, the change that everybody talks about, Nesmith or Mathurin, it wouldn't reduce anyone's minutes. Mathurin's still playing a good amount. His minutes are looked down in this stretch because he had that game where he was sick and barely played. I think that actually impacted his minutes for 2 games, but he's largely been playing, roughly what he was. Like since the suspension, he's been in the low 20s or higher every single game and is averaging 25 minutes per game. And if you go back the stretch right before that, it was, in the a little higher 20s, 26, 27-ish since Christmas, right? He's had a couple higher minute games, like against Golden State when he was very good. He played 34. He hasn't reached into the 30s since his suspension and Nesmith returned, but he's still in the mid to high 20s, maybe 2 minutes here or there, but their minutes aren't that different. So does a change actually needed if it doesn't reduce anyone's minutes? Mathurin just played well against the Lakers in that first half. He was their only good starter, right? I'm not even saying this to say he hasn't played well. It's just a fit thing with the lineup. So in general, for the season, that starting 5, the foursome without Turner, and I keep saying that without Turner part because he hasn't been playing recently, has been very good on 2s and like 35% on 3s. And their opponents are about the same level on 3s, but much worse on 2s. This month, which is a very, very small sample, to be clear, February, they've played 4 games, and it's 9 days in. This will come out, it'll be 10 days in. This month, that group of 4, with whoever the 5th player is at 30% from deep. That's terrible. And that matches the eye test where some people said this at the Lakers game, and I sort of agree with them. They just missed a bunch of shots that they can and normally do make. I agree with that, yes, but they didn't make them. And that's just a longer stretch of them not making them. And their opponents are at 45% from deep. Whew. Okay, so that is like an insurmountable difference, right? 15% from 3 against your most common lineup. You're not going to win very often when that happens, right? That's been rough for the Pacers. It was rough against the Lakers. It's been rough more than that. So we could talk about lots of stuff about, they haven't done well for a month and all this has happened. But a big part of that is they haven't made shots and their opponents have. Now, some of that is their own defensive things, but some people call defensive percentages on 3s lucky. or just like nothing you can really control. And those people have said when the Pacers were rolling and their defense was top 5 or 10 for like a month and a half, that the Pacers were getting lucky on defense with threes. And they were right. The Pacers were bottom 5, I think, in opponent 3-point percentage. But now that's settling in the opposite way, or balancing a little bit. That group hasn't looked as good, but they are also not making shots. My answer would be, I want a little more data. I want to see these guys, one, with Turner back, but two, play a little longer now that Nesmith has returned, and see if with more normalized shooting, can this group get going again? Because they have not had a good game for a while. And I want to see if it resettles or if a change is needed. But a potential part of their slow starts could be that their starting 5 that was just crushing everybody has lost a little bit of that luster. Their defense hasn't been as good. And a potential part of it could be that they've been missing Myles Turner. And a potential part of it could just be that opponents are making every three. And when that settles in a little differently, things might look a little different. And it could be something else, because even in some games, their bench group hasn't been able to help them. They haven't been able to get going in with any sort of traction. It might not be even the starters starting games poorly. But those same groups have been rocky-ish, I would say. Not bad, but less bad than they were at the first quarter, but not as great in the third quarter either. So we'll see. But this is something I wanted to dive into and see, is this a lineup thing? And if it is a lineup thing, you can't blame them for sticking with their starter group that's been so good since they settled on it. But if it needs to be changed at some point, it needs to be changed. I don't think they'll do anything this week. They have 2 games till the All-Star break, but perhaps with time off to reassess, the Pacers could use this data to say, let's see about potentially doing something else. Anywho, speaking of directions and changes and whatnot, lots of teams changed directions or made moves at the trade deadline. Where does that leave them now? Where will things be going? And what do the Pacers now care about in the standings? I always like to think about this late in the season with this final stretch coming as they push down the stretch. We'll get to all that to close out today's Locked On Pacers. Before we do that, though, I need to talk to you guys about FanDuel. When the games tip off, the NBA action is just getting started. NFL's in the rearview mirror. There's no better way to get in on the NBA hoops than on FanDuel. They are America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout a game. So even if you missed the opening tip-off and want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it helps keep every moment of a game exciting. Whether you're backing your team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3, you never want to miss your chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly right now. New FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you place your first $5 bet and it wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. We're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, lots of chaos around the league with these trades. Locked On Mavs, both because Luka got traded and because Anthony Davis debuted and also got hurt. What? That's a bummer. Locked On Mavs has been pumping out content after content, which is crazy. And you can listen to all of it right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And for you YouTube watchers, forgive me. There's a giant Mad Ants blanket behind me from their last game ever in Fort Wayne, and it is covering a bunch of stuff that I have in this room for the rest of this week because I'm getting married in like a couple days, and I have a lot of stuff in my house being stored in various places. So the background will look a little different for the next couple episodes. Let's close this one out with a look around the league from a Pacers perspective. I already talked about trades that I think impact the Pacers, and we've seen the standings shake out the way they have. Detroit won earlier today. The Bucks won earlier today. Shout out to Hubie Brown, by the way, for his last game. Made sure to tune in to that one. What a legend. The Bucks are 1 game behind the Pacers. The Pistons are 3 games behind. Regardless of if those teams got better or worse at the deadline, I think Detroit got better with the addition of Dennis Schroeder. They really need another ball handler. The Bucks, I think they got worse with the Kuzma trade. They did win today with him for the first time. Regardless of that, Giannis is out for a bit now. That's a big deal for the Pacers. The Heat, we'll see if they're any better. The Magic have been playing like crap for a while. Looking beyond that, though, looking beyond what the trade market did to the Pacers, let's look at draft picks. Let's talk about the draft. It's early for this discussion. There's still 2 months left of the season, but post-trade deadline and really post-All-Star break and really in March, when these races can heat up and there's not much game left, teams really want to settle their direction and get where they want to be for a season. And so let's look at the Pacers, who have their own first-round pick this year. Great. We'll talk about that in a second. And have their own second-round pick this year. Great. We'll talk about those in a second. Do they have any external picks? for now, the answer is yes. Is the answer going to be yes when the actual draft comes? We'll see. So one, let's put air quotes up, extra pick the Pacers have is one that they got at last year's deadline, which is very similar to one that they got this year at the deadline. They have the Charlotte Hornets second round pick. But let me stop you there. It is top 55 protected, just like the one they got from Toronto in the Wiseman deal. The Pacers got this one when they took in Corey Joseph's salary and got a ton of cash to send to Golden State along with the draft pick. So the Pacers get the Hornets second round pick this year if the Charlotte Hornets have a top 5 record in the NBA. I'll tell you right now, that's not going to happen. It has not officially happened yet. The Hornets are 13-37, meaning their peak wins is 45. Not a single team has 45 wins yet. It's possible the Hornets finish very high in the standings. I don't know if it's actually possible to get a top 5 record, given like that these teams play each other, but it's not officially eliminated yet. It's not going to happen. So if you wanted to say, hey, they should root for the Hornets, doesn't matter. The other one they have, potentially, they got that. I said that. They got the Charlotte pick in the Corey Joseph trade. The other one they have is from the Edmund Sumner trade. They got it before that. They got this in the TJ Warren trade, I believe, a second round pick from Miami. But then they traded part of it away when they salary dumped Edmund Sumner on the Brooklyn Nets when he tore his Achilles, and they protected it. So the Pacers get the Miami Heat's 2025 second round pick if it is 31 through 37. And if it's not, it goes to, I believe, Golden State. I forget what trade that is from. I think it's from the Dennis Schroeder trade. So that if the Heat finish with a bottom 7 record, they would send this pick to the Pacers. If not, it goes to Golden State. The Heat currently have the 16th worst record. They're a 500 team. The team with the 7th worst record as it stands is the 76ers. I would imagine the Bulls, Blazers, or Spurs will eventually take the direction of trying to get the 7th worst record. I think Miami maybe got a little better trading away Butler, but even if they didn't, even if they got a little worse, I find it very hard to believe they'll fall that far. That is quite the fall. That is a 6.5 game difference from them and that 7th spot. And the Heat, given their draft pick outlay, are very incentivized to make the playoffs this year. So they don't have to give up unprotected picks in future seasons. So I would imagine that the Heat of Miami are not going to get to the bottom 7, even if I thought they were going to be terrible the rest of the year. They have no incentive to get that low. So unless the Heat end up in the lottery and somehow jump up, even that wouldn't matter because it's a second round pick, which is just based on the inverse standings and not the lottery. You can also kiss that pick goodbye for the Pacers. So they actually have no rooting interests this year in terms of getting another pick from someone else. But they do have stuff to root for still for their own picks in both the first and second round. As things stand, there's a huge morass of teams just right around the Pacers in the standings, and that is what they will be rooting for, is how do they get their own pick to be in the perfect possible spot down the stretch. Right now, the Pacers are 29-22. There are 4 teams within a game and a half of them going in the poor direction, and the Pacers don't want to catch the teams behind them. Now, one of those teams is the Bucks. The Pacers would like to stay ahead of the Bucks for playoff positioning purposes. But of these teams within, let's say, 3.5 games of them, 4.5 games gets you every team that will make the playoffs this year, right? That gets you to the Orlando range. In the West, in that range is Minnesota and the Clippers, who they just beat, and the Bucks, and the Mavs. I can't read. And then there's also Golden State, Sacramento, Phoenix, who have the same record as like the Heat, but are technically out of the playoff picture because they're in the West. So that is the thing the Pacers can tangibly root for to help themselves, is that they play well enough to stay in their current seed, which could require the Bucks or Pistons or the Heat or whatever playing worse, while also having these teams right around them, the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have won 3 in a row, the Clippers, the Mavs, just get hot, go on a crazy run. And then the Pacers could, their hope would be to be the 4 seed or whatever, even higher, and get like the 20th or better pick, where like last year their pick was inside the top 20. They sent it to Toronto, obviously, but that would be their hope, and that is what Pacers fans can root for, and all those teams directionally are still going for it. So we'll do standings watch come March, but that is the overview of what to expect this week on this podcast. Should be a guest on Tuesday's show and Friday's show, and then post games the other 2 days. Very easy week when the Pacers play 2 games. Then it's all-star break time, and that will be weird and hard for me, and I'll explain why when the time comes. That said, hope you guys enjoyed today's show. You can find me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Tony R. East. This podcast is a Twitter account at Locked On Pacers, where you can see shorter little clips from every episode right there. Pacers Knicks tomorrow. We'll be all over it. Thank you guys for listening today. Have a wonderful day. Hope you enjoyed the Super Bowl. We will see you very soon.